So, as promised, Reginald Kadzutu is still here with us. He's now joining us by way of phone. He's an economist and the head of retail at Zamara, Kenya. Reginald, thank you so much for sticking with Daybreak. Before we had the challenge of audio, you were taking us through whether Kenya can survive a lockdown if it comes to that.
Yes. So what I was saying earlier is the choice that the government currently has is two things. Is it cheaper to feed the vulnerable, or is it going to be cheaper to treat them? So, for example, if you get an outbreak in Kibera, the cost of medicine for such a large group of people for 23 days or 30 days, how long it takes to clear from corona, vis-a-vis the cost of giving them food or doing food deliveries of basic things that people just need to remain nutritious during this period, is the question that the government is now. Is not really a question of can we afford it, but it's a question of which of the two is actually going to do less damage to our fiscal space. Whether we can afford either of the two, that is an obvious answer of no, we cannot. And that's why we have to rely on money from World Bank and the rest.
All right. And here's the thing, Reginald. At the end of the day, having spoken to a few people, they are suggesting that if a lockdown was to happen, the biggest counties, and they're also, unfortunately, the two biggest counties that contribute to the GDP, that being Nairobi and Mombasa, they should be the ones on lockdown, and that the rest of the country then should be able to continue. Will that help rather than putting the entire country on lockdown?
It depends, because once we reach the stage of community transmission where we are, the truth of the matter is that we've already lost the plot, or lost the tracking of this thing. When it was still imported cases, it's easier to identify. This person has it, these are the contacts.
Right.
But when you're on community transmission where I have it, I have not traveled, I have not gone into contact with someone who has traveled, so you actually don't know who's carrying it and who's spreading it. So if you look down Nairobi and Mombasa, we have it in Kilifi. We have some cases or some quarantine cases in some other counties, in Kitui, in Siaya.
Right.
So if we can identify where the clusters are, and if we say, okay, the clusters are in Nairobi, in Mombasa, and maybe they're in Nakuru, then we stop movement in and out of those three places. Then it makes sense. The question is, do we have that data? Considering we've only tested 2,000 people, and majority of the ones, not even 2,000, 1,000 and something, and majority of the ones tested are all most of them are in Nairobi. So if we don't have the data to be able to now say, this is where it's spreading from, this is where the clusters are starting from, let's lock down these areas. The best thing right now would just to be to lock down the whole country.
Right. And here's the thing, Reginald, let's talk about day laborers and people within the informal traders who already account for 83% of our total workforce here in Kenya. When you have the day laborers and the informal traders, what they make in that day is what they eat. What Mama Mboga sells that day is what she will have to make as dinner that night. What Omondi will make at the construction site is what he will carry. He will use to buy milk and bread for his family. But that's not the case right now. How are such Kenyans supposed to survive?
They will only survive if they do get either a spend from the government, or the government actually provides food for them. Transmission mechanism of giving all these people a spend at this point in time might take a bit of time to set up. An easier thing to set up right now is the infrastructure of distributing this food to the people. Because what you have this sector, but you also have another sector, the sector that is generating these food items, generating the ungas, generating the cooking oils and all. So if we focus on the informal sector and we don't sort out to make sure that production and output continues,
yes,
we will actually compound the problem. We will move it from the informal sector, because if these guys are not getting demand for their goods and their products, they will also start laying off people,
yes,
which also starts increasing the number of the informal sector. So what the government should do right now is become the largest aggregate demand in the economy. What do I mean by that? Sit with private sector, use data and find out how many food you need to feed, what will be in a package. Is it in a packet of unga, some cooking oil, some tomatoes and something? Find out where that supply can be gotten from locally. Government now becomes the purchaser of these things on behalf of these guys will live on a day-by-day basis. You can then make the private sector do the logistics of distributing to these people in a way that you don't also spread corona in the name of distributing food. Or if the government can use NOS to distribute this food. So what you will have done there is you will have kept production and output going and kept those jobs.
Yes.
Also, still people are getting those jobs as you provide the food for this. So you find these manufacturers will still have income to pay the employees. Our manufacturing sector is heavily dependent on the agricultural sector. So as long as they are buying inputs from the farmer, you've also sorted out the people in the village, where 70% of the employment actually is people are employed in the agricultural sector. So that way you keep that supply chain working from the farmer to the manufacturer, and the government comes in between, because where demand has dropped, because guys are not able to go to work on a day-to-day basis, government fills in that demand, and you find you might be able to sustain the least damage to the economy if we decide to use that route.
Right. Here's the thing, Reginald. Let's talk about a very unique group of people within the economy, and that's the farmer. The farmer already has to deal with the locust invasion, and before the locust invasion, the farmer had to deal with drought and flood, and before that, the farmer also has to deal with banks, and banks not giving them loans that easily. On top of that, the horticulture, to be specific, had fallen by 7% in 2019. Talk to the farmers right now. What's your advice for farmers? Because at the end of the day, they're the ones who feed the nation, but also they're the ones who are having the biggest management right now in sort of trying to survive this economy.
So for horticulture, for guys who do flowers, and unfortunately the best thing right now is just to scale operations, try and save as much cost as possible, because in essence, we're not going to be buying flowers. The government come and say, stimulus will buy flowers for everyone. Won't just make sense. We don't have the money to do that. But for the other sectors of the agricultural sector, yes, locust is still a real thing. As much as we have forgotten it, it is still going to havoc to the agricultural sector as we speak even this year, because we are not out of the locust menace. We've all just shifted attention to the coronavirus. Just the other day, the minister flagged a couple of vehicles to go and fumigate.
Yes.
On locusts. So locusts are still actually a serious problem in the country right now. So the best thing that the farmer needs right now is to be able to get an outsource for their produce. Because if the potatoes are not bought, they will rot, and that becomes a written off loss. Most of them have not taken the agricultural insurance that is there. So through AFC, the government can actually make sure that whatever is being produced by the farmers is being purchased, either into storage and preserved, or use the same model that I've said, that the government becomes the final buyer from the manufacturer, who is either making potato crisps or pre-cut potatoes, or buying unga from Unga Group in bulk to feed this informal sector. So Unga will continue buying maize from the farmers and the input from the farmers, so the farmer can continue farming if they are not being disturbed by locusts, continue farming, and they have an output that can actually be bought. For sectors like tea and coffee, I don't know how much tea and coffee we can consume or cushion during this time, but again, tea prices are dropping globally. The supply chain of getting tea to move from one area to another has been disrupted. So if I was the government, is to try and find out how do we still get our tea to Pakistan?
Right.
How do we still get our tea to London? Will London allow a ship to dock that only has tea? And I think this is where our ambassadors who are paid a lot of money in these foreign missions need to be working extra to make sure that at least those who export can still get a channel to make sure that these goods go. And the same thing being, most of our exports are agricultural produce. If we miss a day or two, you're looking at stock that is actually being written off. And that is something that farmers will not be able to recover from. So, yes. I think if we follow that model of where the government now becomes the largest purchaser of most of these things, then we can keep the supply chain at least moving and not grinding to a complete halt and compounding the problem that we will actually currently have.
Right. Now, the fact that we had Ukuri Yatani, the CS of Treasury, saying that they would want to review the budget. Here's the thing. Kenya does its budget around June, July. What would you want to see in the 2020-21 budget, given the pandemic that we are facing right now, and health experts saying that the coronavirus effect may not end as early as April? What would you want to see in that budget review, and even in the next budget preparation, which normally happens around June, July?
I think the government has gotten a very good chance to reset and try and actually get a budget that is balanced for once. Definitely most of the things that we would want to see in the budget now is, okay, post-corona, whether it finishes in September or in October, the budget now is to address how do we kickstart the economy going forward in a way which is affordable. Yeah. What I would definitely want to see there, if our legislators are actually very moral in how they do their dealing, is a drastic cut in the largest expenditure item on our budget, which is the recurrent expenditure, which is salaries. This provides us a brilliant opportunity to actually rationalize our pay and our salaries based on the income that we actually generate. Because if we know that revenue is going to go down low, just like other players in the industry, like Kenya Airways, who their CEO took an 80% pay cut, the president has taken an 80% pay cut, we would expect this to go across the MPs, the MCAs, and unfortunately, even the civil servants might have to take a pay cut at this point in time, maybe not to the extent of 80%, but lower. So if we can reduce that largest part of the budget, will be one way we can have a budget that says frees up enough funds now for the government to either continue supporting people as they get back to their normal day-to-day life, spare the sectors that employ the most people and have the most ripple effect to the economy. I would expect to see the VAT on fuel removed. I think that the VAT they should have removed from the beginning, because it has more ripple effects than the other VAT that they've done. Because if you remove the VAT from fuel, you have affected transport prices, you have affected electricity costs, you have affected manufacturing costs, which have ripple effects to prices. So they now need to look at those low-hanging fruits, as in what are the things that we can actually cut on to try and even have at least a balanced budget for 2021.
Right. And here's the thing, Reginald, I need to let you go, but perhaps this being our last question. China is Kenya's largest economy. Kenya's import already accounts to 20% of her imports to China. As we speak, Wuhan, some of the industries in Wuhan have already resumed, some of the factories rather in Wuhan have already resumed operations. Here in Kenya, we had the CS of Health, Mutahi Kagwe, saying it's not even a matter of funding that is the issue, it's a matter of the materials, and this is an issue globally. What's your practical advice to a Kenyan right now watching and they're worried about their budget and their pocket? What should they do ahead to make sure that they plan accordingly for the next few months, the next few weeks?
I think for individual Kenyans, this is the time that, as much as we're working from home, take time to actually review your finances. What are the excesses that you have been having in your budget that you actually realize now that there are things that you cannot do without? As a Kenyan going forward, this pandemic is a wake-up call that if you don't have reserves, same as even corporate Kenya, if you do not have reserves, then when you get hit by a shock, which might be a pandemic or a loss of a job through a pandemic or just being laid off or being redundant, if you don't build up an emergency fund, that can last you for at least 5 months, 6 months, so that when such things happen, you are not at zero. At least you have 6 months to plan yourself. And I think where most corporate Kenya is most corporate Kenya actually doesn't have any cash reserves. And that's why companies are closing down, laying off people, because they cannot sustain their operations 1 month without any revenue coming in. So as Kenyans at home, it's a time to look at your budget, look at the expenses. Do you need sausages every day, or can you do sausages twice a week, and actually reduce your expenditure and create a pot that you can easily access in case of any hit on your income, whether through a pandemic or just generally just losing your job, or medical bills that just shoot up beyond your insurance that hit on your income. Then you'll be able to sustain yourself post this period.
All right. Thank you so much, Reginald, for speaking to us. That's Reginald Kadzutu. He's an economist and also the head of retail at Zamara, Kenya.